I often say that even as a child, being outdoors was the safest place I knew. When I was outdoors, very little harm ever came to me. I started to have this relationship where outdoors was safe space and indoors wasn't. The situation that I grew up in was massively unique. We grew up very rural. There wasn't any formal education. My mum had acute mental health problems. My dad was an alcoholic. So I grew up in a kind of world where there was an awful lot of physical abuse, sexual abuse, and domestic violence. From a very early age, I knew what it was like to be treated very badly. The only good thing was that we grew up in that rural setting where I was able to have that time outdoors. When things got really difficult, I was able to get to my kind of happy and safe space. It was only when I got to my mid-teens that I realised that I needed to escape that really bad experience and build something for myself. It was at that point in my life that I got diagnosed with lupus. You can get diagnosed with it for a variety of reasons, genetics, etc. You can also be diagnosed with it because of something that comes up in your background, whether that be stress or trauma that you've been through. It's probably because of what I'd experienced as a child that I then went on to develop lupus. Lupus is an autoimmune disease. That means that my immune system is very overactive and it continually works to reject my own organs and my flesh. I get an awful lot of joint pain and fatigue. That leads to other illnesses, so I have things like Hashimoto's disease and circulation disease. Going through everything I'd experienced as a child and working so hard to try and escape, to then be diagnosed with something like that felt like an impossible task. When you fought so hard to come through something, and then you get that diagnosis, it's a very fight or flight situation. Because I'd fought already, I'd already used my mental reserves to get through that childhood experience. I didn't have anything left in the tank. I had nobody really around me. I had very little resilience. I didn't have any mental ability to see how I could have a life beyond it. That's when I ultimately took the decision to take my own life. When it became apparent that hadn't worked, I realised that the challenge had to be making a better way of staying in. That's when I then reconnected back to the outdoors, the only place that I'd ever known any peace. From just spending a couple of hours every day in the sunshine to then maybe going for a walk, just having that connection back to something that made me feel safe and happy was enough to then make me realise that I had the ability to fight through it. Hidden illness is a really difficult thing to live with. It comes with the privilege of not being discriminated because you're not visibly disabled. There's also this constant feeling of not being good enough. You sit in this no man's land between not being able to relate or fit in to the well people, but also you're not physically at the very disabled end of the scale. The thing I constantly hear is, but you look fine, or you don't look ill to me. Everybody suddenly becomes a doctor when you have an invisible illness. A lot of people suddenly have an opinion on your right to be ill. I always try and do something that challenges me. I found that if I give in and if I succumb to allowing myself to get overwhelmed with emotion, then that's when I become quite vulnerable. Even if I can do the smallest thing to challenge myself, that helps me empower myself to push. In my head mentally, I have a red, green and amber situation. If I'm having a really bad day, then I can pick something from my red list, which might be go and have a cup of tea outdoors or text a friend. If I'm having a medium day, a challenge might look like go for a walk or go for a swim. Or if I'm having a really good day, a challenge might be like go and do Helvellyn. Every day I kind of analyse my physical and my mental health and say, well, what's the best you can achieve on that day? I really live by my motto about I survive in my comfort zone and I thrive outside it, and I think that I can put that into relevance on every single day, regardless if that's a bad day or a good day for me. It was probably a couple of years ago now, and I'm very open with the fact that once you've experienced such abuse, that never leaves. I've come to the realisation that that part of me will always be part of me. Acceptance is as much about saying I'm going to carry that with me as saying I'm okay with it now. I got to a point that even with therapy, I thought actually not talking about it and not acknowledging it is actually more damaging for me. When I first started talking, it was met with both people supporting it, but also a lot of people that said the cause didn't need to be talked about, people that said my own image didn't necessarily fit with the cause that I was representing. You get a lot of scrutiny from people kind of, I guess, questioning what is a hidden illness. When you represent any minority, having that ability to speak up takes a lot of time. The women that I have connected to are women that have similar stories to me, women that have voices but might not have felt able to raise that voice before. Just talking about the joys of what it is to be a woman outdoors and to be a woman creating her own life. It sounds crazy, but the energy that these people give me is sometimes the difference between me being able and me not being able. So much of the outdoors is really visioned towards fully accessible people. 25% of us in the UK have a physical health condition or classify ourselves as disabled. If you then consider all of the people that know directly somebody that has one of those challenges, that's probably over the majority of us. If we're living in a society where over the majority of us either have an illness or disabled or know somebody, then it's within all of our best interests to actually create a world that's accessible for all of us. I've learned now that it's okay to say, I'm not feeling good today. I can't run away from that. I can't hide that. And I have to just accept that. There is a lot of strength, I think, in empowering myself to be able to say today is a bad day, physically and or mentally. And that's that. Strength is also saying, I'm going to go and climb a mountain today, and whether it takes me 10 hours and I'm going to need all my pulse or my medication, so be it. All scales and all points of that scale, there's achievement to be had. I can see my life in 3 quite distinct chunks. The very lost child that was in the centre of that abuse. The child that got to that diagnosis and was at that yes or no point. And then me now. It's funny because I look at all 3 of those people and can acknowledge they're all forms of me. But it's almost like a butterfly in its life stages. They're not the same person, but together they connect. I am proud of that journey to an extent, but there's so much more that I want to achieve that I try not to focus on saying, look where I've got to. The first 15 years of my life were about surviving. The last 15 years have been about thriving, and now I need to build on that.